This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
Ben Settle, super practical.
I'm not telling people to have a mistress. I'm teaching you, learn the lesson from the people who have a mistress, because there's many business lessons that apply.
Pious.
There's a part in the book of Revelation where Jesus says, I want you either hot or cold. I'm spewing lukewarm churches out. And I think it's a good way to look at your list.
Romantic to his very core.
Once in a while, I'll give my girl a present, like a Snickers bar or something.
And totes tender.
If someone asks you to walk on eggshells, smash the eggshells and let the chips fall wherever they may.
Adored by feminists everywhere.
It takes a strong woman to admit when she's wrong.
Not a judgmental bone in his entire body.
I look at all the free information people give just on Facebook and I go, what a bunch of time hoes.
Has a PhD in armchair philosophy.
In the land of dumbasses, the smartass is king.
You'll never meet a more sensitive guy.
If you really care about people, you shame the hell out of them. This is Ben Settle, the bensettle.com podcast. Last week, I ended on saying I was going to pick a obscure Arnold Schwarzenegger movie from the 80s and pull out some of the, I didn't pull all of them out, but some of the many important business and persuasion lessons that we can get from it. Actually, I think there'd be a lot more, and maybe I'll even do a sequel to this someday. But and I'm not talking about Terminator or True Lies or any like the ones that everybody are Conan like that. I am talking about, Jonathan, one of the best Schwarzenegger movies, if not my favorite Schwarzenegger movie of all, and that would be. Why don't you guess which one do you think I'm talking about?
I already know it's got to be Kindergarten Cop.
Okay, it's not. Well, see. That Kindergarten Cop was the 90s.
Oh.
So this is an 80. Of course, you do have the notes in front of you, don't you? So I forgot. I was not supposed to send you notes. I forgot about. You said you didn't want me to, but I sent them anyway to defy you. Well, I will just come out and say it. My favorite Schwarzenegger movie is Twins, and that is the movie he did with Danny DeVito, and it was directed by the great Ivan Reitman, who I believe did Ghostbusters. He's one of my favorites, and it's basically about these two guys, these two twins, who are the result of a genetic experiment where this, I don't know if it was the government, whoever the hell did it, they created like a milkshake. Like these 9 perfect men created like the ultimate sperm. And then they found the perfect woman to bear this child. And then the result was not 1, but 2 kids, because the embryo split and you had these 2 fraternal twins. One being Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is Julius Benedict. And then you have the younger one, Danny DeVito, who is Vincent Benedict. And the mother is told that the child died at birth, so you know they exist. And yes, I'm giving spoilers here, whatever. And so you have basically the Arnold Schwarzenegger is supposed to be like all the purity and all the strength and all the smarts and all the intelligence and all the goodness went into him. Well, all the crap left over, which is what basically how it's worded in the movie, went into Danny DeVito. So you have Danny DeVito, this like, this short, bald, overweight guy running around, doing his thing. And he's like bad. He's like, he sets the orphanage on fire and steals and has sex with one of the nuns, or at least it's kind of implied he did at the place he was staying in as a kid. And he's always getting in trouble with the law. He's got all these parking tickets he never pays. And he's always like, sleeping with married women and all this. He's just going around doing that kind of stuff. He's street smart, but he's not like book smart at all. And he's, not very moral either. At the other end, you have Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, who, again, he's like, 7 feet tall, all muscle, just the nicest guy in the world. Not nice and like I'm a nice guy, I'm actually going to screw you over, but like a lawful good. Like if you ever played Dungeons and Dragons and you see the different alignments, there's lawful good, neutral good, chaotic good, and that sort of thing. Lawful evil, neutral evil, chaotic evil. Then there's lawful neutral, and chaotic neutral. This guy would be like lawful good. Like he's law abiding. He's trying to do good. He'd be like your typical superhero at the same. While Danny DeVito's character would be like your typical supervillain. So that kind of gives you an idea. And he was all the crap left over, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was all the good stuff, and they have to go find each other and all this. So where do the business lessons come in? Well, there's a lot of street smart lessons you can get just by following Vincent, Danny DeVito's character. And my favorite part, Jonathan, is when he's trying to explain to Julius, Arnold Schwarzenegger, about women, because Julius was born on an island, a tropical island. He was isolated from the world. He just did research all day. He learned how to fight, do research. He read every book known to man, probably. Very smart guy, book smart, but he knew nothing about, for example, how to take a girl out on a date, how to dress himself or anything like that. Like he comes to America. Have you ever seen this movie, Jonathan? I feel like I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Okay, so I'm going to implore that you and Cupcake watch it again for the whole family and enjoy it. But this is the thing. So one of the things he teaches is he's talking to Julius about women, and Julius is like, I had the most respect for women. They're precious things. He basically pedestalizes them. And the first thing Danny DeVito says, "You're a virgin," because he like puts these girls completely on a pedestal. And he goes, "No. Women like a men who are devious and dangerous because it keeps them on their toes." Now, anybody in the dating niche knows that Danny DeVito's right about that. And that if you act like Arnold Schwarzenegger, you're not going to get Kelly Preston like he did in the movie. You're going to end up getting rejected by the Kelly Prestons of the world and all that. No matter, even if you look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's not going to matter because that's just the way it goes. So that was, to me, very interesting advice. And it goes hand in hand with my villains books, I like to think, Mr. Jonathan. These devious and dangerous to keep people on their toes. That does not mean be abusive, by the way, but it does work on a practical level to not be like that nice guy. We talked about this when we went through all the villains book chapters and this idea of like trying to be like the nice guy and all that. It's just going to get you at the bottom of the hill every time. And so I would say like there's nothing wrong with someone who, if we're going to go back to the Dungeons and Dragons analogy of lawful good, there's nothing wrong with people like that. But they have to realize that they're at a disadvantage in a lot of ways. And they're more likely to get taken advantage of, more likely to not win. And so it is. The Danny DeVito characters are more likely, the villains, he's very proactive, while Arnold Schwarzenegger in that movie is very reactive. There's another quote in there where Arnold Schwarzenegger like drives his car like on its side on accident. He's like, first time he's ever driven in his life. He like literally takes the manual out of the glove compartment and starts speed reading it. And somehow he ends up like driving this car that's on two wheels on its side. And he's like, "Hey, Vincent, I can teach you how to do this." And the first thing Vincent says is, "Look, let me tell you something about America, Julius. Nobody likes a smartass. I.e., nobody likes people going around bragging about shit. They just do not like it. People on social media could really learn a lesson from this, I think, Jonathan." I mean, something tells me you're not too impressed when people like just go around pounding their chest about how great they are. And, I would say that the exception to that, though, is when somebody's really, really good at what they do. Like, for example, Gary Halbert could get away with that all day long. Like, I have I talked about how, like, his family now sells, like, all of his old newsletters in 2 giant binders.
Yeah.
And one theme that goes through all these newsletters, he's always bragging and always pounding his chest. But the reason he did it is because he could get away with it. Kind of like Stan Lee. And I wrote about this in an email once. The great Stan Lee, who created Fantastic Four and Spider-Man and Iron Man and all that, and the Avengers, the Hulk. When it became very obvious after he wrote the first Fantastic Four issue, it became very obvious a few months later when the sales figures came in that it was a huge hit and the highest selling comic in the world. So he decided to put on there world's greatest comic book, on the cover of all of them. And he could get away with that because it was the highest selling comic. Now, people just did that and it was just like some obscure new comic book. It would sound stupid. Well, so it is. Nobody likes a smartass. There's like another character in this movie called Beetroot McKinley. No, Beetroot McKinley, like this Texan, like probably multi-millionaire, if not a billionaire. And what happens is, and I know I'm giving away the plot here, Jonathan, so when you re-see it, I'm sorry, it won't be much of a surprise to you.
Okay.
Or anyone else listening to this. But the plot is Vincent is to get by in life, he steals cars. That's one of his main things. And he steals a car that has this weird thing in the trunk. It's like some contraption. He doesn't even understand what it is. But he finds out like who it's supposed to be delivered to and all that, and finds out that it's like he can get $5 million for delivering this thing. Well, he thinks the guy, Beetroot McKinley, says, "Look, the deal was 5. And he goes, "Well, I want 20. And he goes, 20. And he almost like reaches through the phone to like strangle Vincent. And he goes, "I could do better than 5 here." And then Beetroot goes, "Well, if you can do better than $5 million. And then that's when Vincent, his whole thing changed because he thought he was talking about thousands, not millions. So he thought he was only going to get $5,000 for delivering this stolen car. It's going to be $5 million. But during the thing, when he thought it was just thousands, he goes, "Hey, Beetroot, if we can't negotiate, we wither and die." And I would say life, you can pretty much narrow a lot of stuff down in business to that. You have to always be negotiating constantly. Negotiation is the key to everything. And most people never bother to get good at it. They don't try to add their hand at it. They almost kind of like flee from it. They give in way too easily. They go for win-win instead of like what makes sense. And this is all Jim Campism. Anyone who's read Jim Camp stuff knows what I'm talking about. You know, collective bargaining and all that. That's not real negotiation. Real negotiation is a totally different thing. And if you don't learn how to negotiate properly, you will wither and die in business. Not literally, but in business, you're never going to get what you could out of it. And this includes selling via email and sales letters and everything else. You got to learn how to negotiate because that's all persuasion is at the end of the day. If you don't, you could even switch out the word negotiate with persuasion. If we don't learn how to persuade, we wither and die. And so it is. And then this last thing I want to talk about is in this movie, Julius, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, has these things called 3 rules of a crisis situation. And there's 3 parts of this movie where, like, for example, the first time he finds his brother being attacked, Danny DeVito's being attacked because he owes this loan shark money. Arnold Schwarzenegger steps in and says, you know, you screwed up the first rule of a crisis situation. And then he's like, what's the first rule of a crisis situation? You move too soon. You never negotiated. You don't know what kind of enemy I am, which I think is actually very good principle to go by, Jonathan.
Yeah.
You negotiate first and you attack last. That was his first rule. Now in the movie, he ends up kicking this guy's ass basically because of that. And so it is. But I look at this a lot more, even deeper. Like, for example, controlling your emotions. You know, a lot of people love this whole like entrepreneurial thing, what they call it like fire ready aim, which, I know it sounds cool in the books and it sounds cool from the stage, but it's really an idiotic way to go about doing anything. I mean, why would you? I mean, I understand the appeal of it. I understand there's certain personality types that gravitate toward that sort of thing. And no matter what I say, they're always going to have that. I don't see that as something to be celebrated at all, actually. I don't think it makes any sense to actually do that because you don't know what kind of enemy you're dealing with. You don't know what kind of competition you're dealing. If you don't do research, you're already like way behind the people who do research. And this is a function, I think, of lack of patience and a lack of controlling emotions. People don't want to take the time to gather the facts first when they want to sell something, especially when they want to get a client or something. It's one-on-one. They never bother to like find out about that client, to find out what they want. They just go in there guns blazing, throwing Zig Ziglar lines at him or whatever. And I just don't, to me, that makes no sense. In Wing Chun, you're told, and I'm sure you're told this in a lot of martial, I would imagine anyone who knows who's been around, you always assume the guy that you're fighting is at least as good as you, if not, and probably better, right? But most people go in and do the opposite. They do what Schwarzenegger said. You're moving too soon. You don't even know what kind of enemy you're dealing with. And that actually has a very direct application to copywriting, believe it or not. So real life story here, Jonathan. There's this interview, and I think I know I've talked about this on this show before. I'm going to talk about it again, where the great Jim Rutz, the late great Jim Rutz, was he was being interviewed. I think it was by AWAI or something. It was many years ago. And he was talking about how he sold like investments and all that. And he's like, look, I don't understand this idea of like dumbing down my language for people. I mean, these guys are probably smarter than me. They have money to invest. I think that's a good way to look at it. I mean, a lot of people like talk down to their list and they talk down to everyone. I'm not saying don't use simple language. I'm just saying don't talk down to them like they're stupid. Because you might be surprised. A lot of people might be smarter than you are in your list. And at least that's what I hope. I don't know about you, Jonathan. I'm
Most
trying
of
to
my
get smart
list
people.
is. They tell me all the time.
Yeah, my haters are always the ones telling me this. My haters always make this very plainly clear to me that they're very much smarter than me. But that's a good rule to go into. Don't move too soon. You negotiate first and you attack last. And that's the first rule of a crisis situation. I think that's a good rule for business too, a good principle. The second rule of a crisis situation, Jonathan, is if you choose to bluff, you must be prepared to have your bluff called. And by the way, I don't know where I read somewhere on the internet that the writers of this movie got this from like some old swordsman, martial arts swordsman. Like these were rules that were actually created like in the 17th century by some swords guy. So it kind of makes sense. If you choose to bluff, you must be prepared to have your bluff called. And that is just good negotiation too. You can't, if you want to get neediness out of your system when it comes to persuading someone to do something, you have to be okay with taking a loss or taking an L, as some people call it. You got to be okay with that. And you got to be prepared to have, like, if you're going to do something, you're going to get called on it. So these guys, like, for example, in politics now, that they make these claims, they have better, and they're not prepared for someone to call them out on it. They look stupid. Who's that chick in the news now? She's like a unabashed socialist. I forget her name. She's like 28 years old. She's out of New York. Ran for Congress or whatever. She beat this incumbent Democrat. I forget her name. But she's like this. The girl is like dumb as a box of rocks. I mean, and I'm being nice when I say that. She literally has no clue how to handle herself. She won't even like debate a guy like Ben Shapiro, who's like, he's kind of like an intellectual lightweight of the conservative movement. I know there's people who can disagree with me on that, but that's a whole other thing in and of itself. But the point is, she won't even every time she says something, it's obvious that she's going to get called on a bluff. She wouldn't last 5 minutes in a real debate. And so it is. You got to be ready to have your bluffs called. And a very good principle to do business with, especially if you're negotiating. There's this movie Heat where the guy says, don't get involved with anything you can't walk away from in 30 seconds.
Yeah, De Niro.
And I think De Niro said that. It's a very, very good line. And finally, the third rule of a crisis situation, and this was probably not invented by that swordsman. I think this is just written into the movie because of how it ended, how they beat the bad guy at the end. It's just duck, like you should have ducked. If you don't duck, you're going to get hit. And I won't give the big spoiler in the movie for that, but it is kind of a funny moment. And I think but I still think it's a good principle in life. You should always be ready to be able to move out of the way of something coming at you, whether it be competition, whether it be a troll, whether it be the government, it could be a government agency, whether anything attacking you. The last thing you should do to attack something that's bigger than you is to stay in the way. If a truck is coming at you, move out of the way. You should be able to duck. You should be ready to duck. If you hear a gunshot, your automatic movement should be to duck, to safety. And a lot of people don't take that. They don't take that in business, probably because the internet lets you get away with a lot of stuff that you couldn't offline when it comes to like testing and all that. I was thinking that this is going to become an email player's rule, Jonathan. But I heard this recently on a podcast. This guy was debating this other guy, and he goes, I'm always ready, because they were like getting ready to debate each other. He goes, I'm always ready, because if you're always ready, you don't have to spend time getting ready. And how that relates to duck, I don't know exactly, but it just reminded me of that. So anyway, that's the movie Twins, and some of the business wisdom you can scrape from it. I highly recommend watching it multiple times. It's a very entertaining movie. Believe it or not, it's probably my favorite Schwarzenegger movie. Either that or The Running Man, which I like a lot too.
Oh, yeah.
I love The Running Man. That is a great movie.
Me too.
That's it. What's his name? Richard Dawson, the guy used to do the Family Feud. I mean, he's like the perfect villain in that movie. But that's it for this time. Next week, Jonathan, we're going to go over the 11 signs that you might be a marketing pro. And this is going to apply to a lot of people who don't think it applies to them. But I have to give you the medicine. Otherwise, you can't get better. And that will be next week.
Oh, man, I can't wait. So another bensettle.com podcast is in the can. We'll be back in your earbuds next time. Thanks for tuning in.
You've been listening to the bensettle.com podcast. To download yourself a free issue of Ben's prestigious $97 per month email players newsletter, which is going to show you 24 ways to write emails people eagerly read, click, and buy from, head on over to www.bensettle.com. Off you go. You know it makes sense.
This is the podcastfactory.com.